Hi, welcome to Living Healthy with Amy Turner. Today we have a guest, Jeanne Larson. Jeanne, we're so glad to have you today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I met Jeanne in November of 2022 at a company called Fly, and that teaches you how to retrain your brain, teaches about neuroplasticity. Jeanne has had the privilege of working for two advanced brain clinics that treat difficult neural health challenges with neuroplastic change. She has had come to know that as amazing and advanced as those therapies are, they can be undone by our own beliefs and maps around what has happened. She's worked in the behavior unit for Nebo School District and life skills and classes in the Alpine Clinic. She was the director of business development for Cognitive FX and office manager for the Neuro Clinic. She's currently a facilitator where she assists others in retraining their brain using neuroplasticity. So, Jeanne, I'm just curious, could you tell us how you first heard of neuroplasticity?
So, actually, I first heard about it probably 8 years ago when nobody was talking about it. Most people thought it was like witchcraft or something. It's all over the internet now. And I actually heard from my daughter about it, who spent 8 years bedbound, and she was researching ways to get better. And to be honest, when she actually brought it up with me, I dismissed it because it sounded so crazy to me because I'm 60 years old, and my experience with medical things was very different. And if you went to the doctor and they told you to do X, Y, and Z, you just did it without questioning it. I'm so grateful we're not in that place anymore, that we can question things and research things. And then I had the opportunity of getting a job at Cognitive FX because of my background with sports. And I'm not an athlete, but my husband has been a college athlete, a college coach, a high school coach, done camps and all over. So I had this network of people that was interesting to Cognitive FX. And this was in the early days of their clinic, even though they had done several NFL athletes. They strictly deal with concussion.
Mhm.
And so I was able to, get hired on there and do a lot of networking for them and be over their interns through the neuroscience department at BYU, and or not the interns for the neuro, that was going on there, but I helped with the social media people, which was really interesting because I don't have those skills, but because of my contacts and things, they have me work with that and just, serving the patients in the clinic. And there were vast different stories and combined problems, but they only came into the clinic to be treated if they'd had a concussion, like been in a car accident or had a sports related injury. And as I watched these therapies go on, um, it was astounding the stuff that changed in their life besides getting the concussion symptoms out of the way. So that's where I first started learning about it. And it's been a big journey ever since. And I knew back then that one day it would be all over the place like it is, even though at that time people thought it was crazy and that it couldn't be true because it seemed so miraculous.
Right.
So,
That's awesome. Thank you. So, can you share with us maybe some experiences then with your daughter, how it's helped her?
sure. Would you like me to give you a cool definition of neuroplasticity for those people who don't know what it is?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jeannie, because that is one of the questions I was going to ask you at the very beginning.
Oh, okay. I
And
can
then I
go
forgot.
back and do
I'm
the other,
sorry.
and we can.
No, you're good.
Um,
Go ahead and say it now. That's good.
so we'll talk about I have 5 children. I have 2 daughters and 3 sons. And my daughter that introduced me to this, she actually could hardly get out of bed. I mean, a big day for her was to get in the shower and maybe come down to the car and go to the car wash with me. And she would just sit in the car. She could not function. And she
Wow.
was in extreme pain. She, at the time, had been diagnosed with Crohn's disease. and also chronic fatigue syndrome. So she couldn't function. And a lot of people were very judgmental of her because she looked normal and was very intelligent, but she couldn't do much or she would lose all of her energy. So, one of the miraculous things that she did through researching is she had me take her to my husband's school one day while they were out at practice, and she got dressed in like like running clothes. And she had
Mhm.
me take pictures of her posing running on the track, even though she could barely stand up. And
Wow.
she would look at those pictures and she did vision boards and things like that. And at the time, I was like, how can you putting a vision board up or saying what you want? It's not magically going to come to you. I was really closed off to the
Yeah.
thought of those things. I'm like, that's really stupid. How does it just magically show up? So she did a lot of daily things where she would envision herself being well and being able to go for simple walks
Wow.
and being able to move out of our home. And through some different things, she did become a patient at the neuro clinic and then actually worked there for a little while. She is out on her own now, and it's been really miraculous because we thought she would live with us her whole life. And she still has things that she deals with, but she's not in our bed rotting in a bed in our house, rotting away, not able to even get in the shower, but like once a week. So
Wow, that is a huge, huge blessing, huh?
yeah, it's great.
So, how did you feel when you, could see these changes going on with your daughter?
Oh, it's just like such a blessing and a tender mercy and feeling like, wow, she is going to have some sort of life that we didn't, because she started getting ill when she was about 19. And
Uh-huh.
this went for 8 years. So all of her friends and everybody went to school. She wanted to actually be a surgeon when she was in high school. She has got really good grades, very beautiful voice, a talented artist. She could draw before she could walk. And I tell people that and they don't believe me. She
Wow.
never held a pencil like this. She always put it in her hand and drew from like when she was 18 months old.
Wow, that is talent.
So or younger, because she walked at 14 months old. But she had all these great, exciting things. And this happens when we have devastating medical stuff happen as parents watching this. You grieve the life that you thought they would be able to have.
Right.
And yeah, and so through this, she's has a great desire to help people and help them. And she has a different life than what she thought. As a young girl in high school, she had dreams of being a surgeon, but because she's always been drawn to medical things, but her whole vision of that is totally different now. And there's nothing wrong with surgery or medications. There's a time and a place for this, but understanding neuroplasticity and our ability to change what's happening in our brain is a totally amazing component that there's so much we can do with that without having to go to that. Now, sometimes we do have to go to that, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
things we can do without it. So,
Yeah, it's very empowering, that neuroplasticity, huh? It just kind
yeah.
of puts you in the driver's seat and helps you be
Yeah.
in charge of your life, which is amazing. So is that what got you interested in working at those clinics with
No,
neuroplasticity?
I didn't know anything about it initially when I went to work at Cognitive FX. I had a friend in my ward
Okay.
that was helping her sister, who was the manager of the clinic.
Okay.
And she said they were hiring and I was looking for a job. And so I just went out I really didn't know much about what they did there. I knew they were a concussion clinic. I
Uh-huh.
was interested in it because I've had 8 concussions starting from a really young age. And I actually started having seizures from it when I was about 25. And I didn't realize that's what it was from. They first thought I had a brain tumor. And so that interested me to work there and see how they helped people with concussions. And the doctor, actually, I'd been treated by her through the hospital through mainstream stuff
Hmm.
for one of the last concussions I had that I got in a behavior unit in special ed. They sent me to her. So I already knew the doctor of the clinic and we had a background together, but I hadn't gone through this neuroplastic change protocol. And
Okay.
so that's why I was interested in starting there. And I actually, in the beginning, I'm like, this can't be real what I'm seeing because it's so, we had a gentleman that had been a boxer. He was probably in his 70s who had sustained probably 40 concussions in his young life as a boxer. And
Wow.
he had some debilitating stuff that was happening to him. And even though it wasn't perfect, it changed his function and his ability to enjoy his old age, the neuroplastic change. And when I was at Cognitive FX, Dr. Norman Deutsch, I don't know if you've heard of him. Have you? Do you know who he
I
is?
No, I
So
don't.
he is a Canadian doctor that was one of the first people to really talk about this and write about it. And actually, back when I started at the Cognitive FX, there was 25 years of research into neuroplasticity and neuroplastic change that people were not really, it was like, this is too crazy. And you can actually look him up on YouTube and see videos, but he has several books. And one of the books that he's written is called The Brain That Changes Itself. And this is a description of what neuroplasticity is out of a description of his book. It says the brain's ability to change its own structure and function in response to activity and mental experience. So,
Okay.
um, and he writes about that in that book, The Brain That Changes Itself. And then while I was working at the clinic, he published a new book called The Brain's Way of Healing. And he's from Canada, he's a Canadian doctor.
Okay.
He went all over Canada, the United States, different places that had clinics like Cognitive FX, and actually saw and wrote about different therapies that they did and case histories. And in this book, The Brain's Way of Healing, they talk about one of the patients at Cognitive FX. And he also sent many patients from Canada that were his actual patients to Cognitive FX. They came from Canada to be treated.
Wow.
Um, so he's a good one to read about and see. He's one of the pioneers of getting this word out, and there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of different ways to change the structure and function of our brain. So,
That's great. I'll have to read those books. That sound really interesting. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that. Um, so I'm curious too about your concussions. So I want to go back to that. So did they never fully heal? Is that what happened and you started having seizures, or help me understand that?
yeah. So I had my first grand mal seizure when I was 25. I'm 60. My
Okay.
first child was 9 months old. She's 36 almost, and next week she'll be
Oh,
36.
sorry.
And I had a lot of big challenges because of this, but I didn't recognize that I'd had all these concussions and till I started learning about it. And I could look back and go, oh, I was running with a screwdriver when I was 18 months old and fell on it,
Oh,
put it
wow.
through my eyebrow. Um, a couple of different car accidents. Back in the day, we didn't wear seat belts, and I went into the windshield and
Oh my.
falling off the bed at my aunt's house. We were wrestling on the bed, and I fell backwards onto a basement floor with my head caught the impact in the
Oh
back.
my.
And then a couple of different things happened to me when I worked in special ed in the behavior unit.
Mhm.
And so I just didn't recognize really what they were until I got hurt in the behavior unit and started on this journey. I flipped numbers my whole life and didn't recognize it till I was 25. My husband figured that out. And so I had a lot of learning disabilities, word finding issues at a young age, with ability to read something and not have it register, and just noise bothering me, and lights and the feedback on a radio and stuff would get me really upset and overloaded because I was already had all these sensory stuff. So when I worked in the clinic
Uh-huh.
initially, I really wanted to go through treatment, but they do a boot camp there. Back when I worked there, it was $10,000 for 4 days. And
Wow.
as a employee, I got a $300 discount. So I really wasn't in the position to do that,
Mhm.
because of how intense it was, and the functional MRI that they do, that's very expensive to do that. And then they had all these different therapists and people that worked with you from like cognitive therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, and all these different things that would target the areas that they could see on there and help them function properly so that these symptoms would go away. And so I started looking into it to see if there was anybody else that did it. And that's how I found the Neuro Clinic. And I actually went through treatment there. I got off all my seizure medication and I was on antidepressants for probably 25 to 30 years also, because antidepressants,
Mhm.
anticonvulsants slow down your brain activity so you don't have a seizure. That's a basic way of explaining it. And
Okay.
so it's very common for people who are on seizure medication to have really severe depression.
Okay.
And I suffered with anxiety also. And so when I went through the neuro clinic and they do things differently, it's kind of a different way to skin the cat, but you're doing the same thing. Instead of them doing a functional MRI,
Uh-huh.
they did balance and vision testing. Your eyes are the only organ in your body that's attached to every area of your brain. So I'm sure
Mhm.
you've heard of rapid eye movement therapy and different things like that. They did do that there, but that's why that can be really successful, is because just us moving our eyes up and
Mhm.
down, back and forth, if it's targeted in the right way, it's more complex than that. We can rewire parts of our brain. And we, just doing it's not going to help you without knowing. But this is one of the reasons we have such a high anxiety, suicide, different things like that.
Mhm.
Being on our phone, it's not just the light. It's not just, oh, I can't measure up because all these people have this fantastic life and that's making me feel bad. When we scroll, our eyes move up and down and side to side, and we're actually rewiring our brain by scrolling through our phones. And we map things
Interesting.
differently reading in a book than we do on social media. Like
Mhm.
if you're reading a book and you go, oh, I want to show you this quote, that it's like in the 20s or the 300s, and if it's on the left or the right side. And we don't have that when we're reading on a phone or a tablet and stuff. So there's a lot of things that have really changed the way our brain wires. And we grow new neurons when we learn new things. And so it's a constant process where in my younger life it was you are what you are and your brain's stuck that way, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. I've seen people in their 80s have phenomenal switches in these clinics that have
Mhm.
been absolutely astounding. So,
That's awesome. That's amazing. I know I have heard that a lot that, if you sit there and scroll on your phone compared to writing or reading a book, it's different. It is changing, your brain. And so I think that's important that we keep teaching our kids, grandchildren and to keep reading,
yes.
books and writing because that's so important.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's one of the small pieces of what our phones and computers do. It just really is an addictive process that gets a dopamine and other responses through certain things that we're doing. But as you and I know, we can get that different ways. And we're
yeah.
not stuck there. We're not stuck in, addictive cycles and things like that. So,
Yes, that's so huge. I took human services. I have a bachelor's in human services back when I went to college and have psychology and counseling skills and things like that, took classes like that. Um, and I don't remember if I was ever taught, if your brain was always going to be that way, but I just always knew inside of myself that it could change. I don't know. There was something inside of me that
oh,
knew
I
that it
love
could
that.
change. It's interesting. Yeah.
Well,
So,
I love that because that means you're a pioneer with this, to have that understanding. Someone like me, I really relied on the doctors and the data that we had that said, no, like with my seizures, you're going to have to be on medication your whole life, and you need to really manage the stress because that expedites and brings the seizures on. And I remember feeling like, oh, okay, this is my life, and being really, and not being able to see beyond it. When I
mhm,
was young, I started taking flying lessons because I wanted to get a pilot's license. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. They won't let me have that with this history. And there were many, many things. I can't go to college. I can't do this
mhm.
because my brain is so damaged. I I can't even read and process things and have it and retain it. That was my problem, is I couldn't retain it.
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah.
so I always had a notebook writing things down, whether it was church or other things, so that I could retrieve what I had learned. And but that's been a blessing too, because it's developed some skills that through that problem, I'm very different now. I haven't been on any medication for over 6 years. I haven't had a seizure. I'm not on antidepressants. I have the tools to manage it in a different way than medication. And that's going to upset a lot of people to say that. And I'm not saying don't take your medication, but there are other tools that you can use to understand why your brain is giving you that feeling and
Mhm.
how you can help that, you know?
Yeah, that is wonderful. I love that. Um, I know it's just such a blessing to have natural things that can help us, you know?
Yeah.
And I agree. I feel like sometimes we do need medication, but I think it's for me at least, I'd rather go to the natural things first if we can rewire our brain, rechange it, and do other um natural methods and solutions. I'd rather do that, right? Why be on medication?
Well, I
That
think
not help?
everybody would, but sometimes the case is so extreme
Mhm.
that you have to ease into it. Like when I first started doing the program where both of us were trained, I had such extreme anxiety. And initially, when I went through this program with Dr. Oliver and got off my medication, I didn't experience that. And I didn't experience the depression. It just was kind of gone. It was really exciting.
Yeah.
But over time, I never had another seizure, but I started falling back into the depression and the anxiety.
Uh-huh.
And I know now it's because of the way I looked at what was happening. Sorry, I need to take a drink of water. I'm going to start choking here for some reason.
You're good.
So, my belief systems around that, I guess, reared their head. And I started experiencing that again. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we're taught, exercise, get a good night's sleep, meditate, do all these things. And those are all really phenomenal things, and eat right. But that can feel really overwhelming if you're in the throes of a panic attack, and it'll spiral you even more. And so
Interesting.
simple things to build up to that and get to where you can hear the information and not feel overwhelmed. That's just a simple example of that. And I was never on anxiety medication, but I did have to go out and walk every day so that I could calm my system down, so that I could retrieve and hear the information so I can put it into action. So we really have to look at everybody's situation and help them not feel like they're not trying hard enough if they do have to be on medication initially or whatever, have these other therapies.
Yes.
So yeah, so go ahead.
I agree. No, you're good. And I was going to say about the rapid eye technique. Yeah. So I do some therapy with rapid eye technology. I'm a therapist for rapid eye technology and kinesiology and emotional freedom technique. So I saw a specialist years ago, a therapist that, does that method. And so I was on some medication for anxiety for a few years. And I remember my psychiatrist telling me, well, in about 4 to 5 years, you can go off of this. So I was praying one day and pondering and asking the Lord, when can I go off of this? I know it's coming soon. And so I went and saw a rapid eye emotional freedom technique kinesiology therapist. And after seeing her one time, I went off my medication and I was fine. And so it
Oh,
was
that's great.
amazing how we
Yeah,
can
that's
find
great.
these natural tools to help us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so let's talk about what happens when we do that, if that's okay for a minute.
Yeah.
So, like
Yeah.
with me, they found the areas that weren't firing right, and for some people they'll know what that means, and other people they won't know. But there's in the neurons when they cook together, there's actually a neurotransmitter that goes across and fires electricity, and this is how our body communicates with each other, and our brain tells our body how to function. When this stops and it doesn't happen, we're dead. And so
Yeah.
there's certain things that happen that it will rearrange, like a concussion, it'll go a different route. to keep these connections together so that it can tell our body how to function. And there's different levels of severity with that, with a head injury or
Right.
a trauma or abuse or something. And so when it reroutes, and with a concussion, for example, it causes these sensory issues and light issues and things like that. So
Mhm.
with anxiety, it overfire the pulsing that goes across the neuron, it's overfiring, it's going too fast. That's why we feel escalated. If it goes even faster, this is like a seizure, like when the house blows all the breakers and it shuts everything off.
Mhm.
um, there's too much going on. And that's why when we have a seizure, that's a really basic explanation of it. But when we
Okay.
have depression, it's under firing, it's firing too slow. And so we can actually go in and target these areas that aren't firing right, like with the rapid eye movement. There's TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they actually put magnetic pulses into those pathways and either
Mhm.
speed them up or slow them down, depending on what you're dealing with. And then as they've gone along, they've seen really great advancements with Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, and things like that. There's other ones that stimulate the vagus nerve that send that pulsing through too. And there's many other therapies that will help cause those neurons to fire right. And so we're manually doing it, and exercises like we talked about with the rapid eye movement and other exercises that will force different areas of our brain to fire in a way we're not making them do. So
Yes, thank you for explaining all that. That was wonderful. And I wanted to explain too. I wanted to explain my experience with when I went off my medication. So for me, I went off just a couple days later after I'd seen that therapist, but that's because I prayed about it and God said, "Yes, you can go off of it." And so, in fact, He inspired me before I just went off of it. But otherwise, I would recommend people not to just go cold turkey off their medication. Usually, you have to wean yourself, but for me, that worked. And, I think everyone just has to do what they feel, they're supposed
it's
to do.
true, and it is very individual, and we do need to seek different sources. And I'm a big person of prayer also. I would like to make a comment though about someone who's on seizure medication. If they go off of cold turkey, they will have a seizure. And
Okay.
so that's something I had several different times that I had to wean off 3 to 4 months in transitioning medications and also going off. So that's something to be aware of with a seizure medication. So,
Yes. Thank you for explaining that.
yeah.
Could you share maybe one or two stories of patients that you've heard where that neuroplasticity has really helped change their life?
Yeah. Two of them that are really near and dear to my heart, and I'll be very vague because of HIPAA laws and stuff like that, happened with those. One was an adult and one was a child of 10 years old that had autism, and they had one of them happened in each of the clinics. And I could tell you hundreds of stories of people who'd come in for different reasons. But the first one, this person was in a car accident. They were a passenger in the car and sustained a concussion. And so they were brought in to Cognitive FX to go through boot camp.
Okay.
And their mother was there with them. And she actually had been a teacher for 35 years in special ed. This child of theirs was typical with autism, that they didn't smile. And they were, because sometimes there's very high functioning autism with Asperger's and stuff, but this was not this child or this adult child. I guess they
Yeah.
were about 35. And so the last time the mother had seen their child smile was probably when they were about 2 years old. And their language was very one or two word responses and didn't really ask questions. The communication was very limited. And about the third day into the boot camp, we always ask the patients as they're coming in to fill out a survey so we can track it before they start that day. And then they're there all day and then at night. And he came in and we said, "How's it going?" And with this big smile on his face, it's like, "I feel great," and was speaking in sentences. went through the
Wow.
program, and then one of the things that I did with my job is I would check in on people afterwards and get stories, and we did a lot of video referrals and things. So I called their mother one day and was asking them how things were going, and they were so emotional. They're like, I have been doing this for 35 plus years. I've never seen anything like this. I can't believe that my child is smiling at me. And then told a story about how they went to go pick them up from the mall and they were
Mhm.
in a rental car. And it took them a minute for her to get their attention and get them in the car. And then on the way home, they were like, okay, mom, next time you need to come in a car that I know, or tell me that you're coming in a different
Yeah.
car, and then I'll know where you are. And she said, I was just astounded. I'd never had a conversation with my adult child this way. And they really wanted some research and things done around, really wanted cognitive effects to get involved in the special ed arena, but at that time they were focusing on concussions strictly and doing a lot of research that they've had. It's peer reviewed research that they did in London while I was there, and a whole bunch of things around concussion and with athletes. And so the second story, um, when we were in the neuro clinic, we dealt a lot with concussion and mental illness, addictions,
Mhm.
migraines, all kinds of stuff, vertigo, because that's all your brain doing that. So
Yeah.
we'd find the areas that were off and then target those over a certain period of time. And there was a child who'd come in that was in kindergarten who went through the program, and by their next year of school they were out of the resource classes and in a mainstream class. They weren't wearing the headphones anymore that they had to wear, or they would freak out in the classroom. They were probably in the top of the class in the first grade. And so they had a relative in Bolivia who
Mhm.
had similar but more extreme things that they dealt with autism. And they were about 10 years old. And the dad and the grandma flew from Bolivia to Lehigh and spent 3 weeks with us. And it was amazing, the turnaround of the behavior and being able to manage and be in, you know, our life of being in the store or wherever and not having noise and things cause a meltdown or whatever, and to be able to learn. And since then, they have had several other people from that community come from Bolivia to be treated in the neuro clinic and see what would help. Those are two of my favorite ones because I spent years in special ed working in a behavior unit and working with these kids and loving them, and just seeing those really, really touched me in a deep, profound way. So
Oh, I bet. Those are amazing stories. Thank you for sharing those, Jeannie.
you're welcome.
Oh, those are so touching. And I just like to thank you for coming today. I'm going to share really quick my experience with neuroplasticity. It's just been amazing. I found it almost 2 years ago in May, and it's just completely changed my life. A lot of my anxieties have gone way down, and a lot have gone away, and my depression. And it's just completely changed my life and transformed me. It's such a blessing. I'm so grateful to have neuroplasticity in my life, and for those who, you know, discovered it and have helped us and blessed us. So, and thank you so much for sharing all your experiences and your stories today. Those are
You're welcome.
wonderful to hear. So where can people find you if they like to contact you for more information or for help to facilitate them?
So they can reach out to me through my Facebook page. It's my personal page. It's Jeannie Rano Larson. And I'm going to spell it for you because there's difficulties with all those names. So it's Jeannie, Jeanne. Rano is my maiden name, Ronnow. And then Larson with an ON. So that's how you spell it. So you can find me and you can DM me, and I will reach out to you and we can visit about options and answer questions or whatever you would like to know about.
Great. Thank you so much. We're so glad you came on today. And thank you so much for joining us at Living Healthy with Amy Turner. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of Living Healthy with Amy Turner. If you enjoyed watching, please be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified about future episodes. If you would like to learn more, you can comment below and be sure to follow and message me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thanks a lot for watching and have a fabulous day.